Welcome to all to this session about startups, about how startups are critical enablers of healthcare innovation and economic growth. And we have about 100 people in the room, which is fantastic, shows that there is a lot of interest on this topic. My name is Frank Kumli. I'm leading innovation and entrepreneurship at Basel Area Business and Innovation. We do three things. We are responsible for the investment in the region. We're responsible for the activation of innovation and entrepreneurship in the region, and we manage the 4 Switzerland innovation parks, Basel area in the region, about 35,000 square meters of innovation space under our brand. So welcome to this panel. It's not about me, it's about the startups and of course the value they add to the ecosystem. I just wanted to make a quick scan on the audience. So who is from a startup? Who is from a healthcare provider, hospital? Who is from pharma? Very good. Who are enablers of all of this? Very good. Yes. Are there patient representatives? Yes, Cecile, welcome. Very good. Ahead of this, just a few words about where we are today. Today we are in a session organized, yes, by Basel Area, but by the initiative Day One. We are here to activate healthcare innovation in the region. We believe this region needs to be the digital health hub of Europe. There is no other place. Where else do we have this base of 700 pharma companies in the region that are all in transformation and that are all going towards digital? That's the starting point of what we are doing here, putting this region, the 3 cantons, Basel-Stadt, Basel-Land, and Jura, on the map in the field of healthcare innovation and, of course, digital health. We are talking about healthcare innovation. There are many players involved, many, and for today we have taken 3 out of this big circle where we could have probably have 20 stakeholders around. We are going to focus on startups and their interaction with pharma and their interaction with hospitals. So this kind of trifecta of innovators around the different patient pain points. Ahead of today, I did a quick survey over the weekend. You can do this now on LinkedIn. I learned very quickly. We got 800 responses, and I think that's kind of interesting. As a digital health startup, how fast do you believe? What is your best partner to go fast to market? And the response was yes, pharma or medtech, and we'll talk about it in a minute. And also hospitals, of course, with 26%. And then we look at the challenges. I found it interesting, right? So startups, yes, working with pharma and hospitals, but then the biggest challenge really being accessing the healthcare system to deploy their solutions. And then we looked at hurdles or uncertainties. I don't like the word hurdle, but uncertainties for pharma and hospitals working at the interface with digital health startups, and very often what comes out of it, and very unanimous across both, it's the maturity of the solutions that these companies can partner with. So I found this, it's not rocket science, but it came out of 800 people, give the first feel about what we are going to discuss. So this panel is really about this interaction, startup, pharma, hospitals, and the only reason we are here is to think about how can we accelerate. So we don't want to go too much into theoretical discussions. Still, we want to think about models and frameworks. How do we make it happen in our region to accelerate this very important innovation for all of us? So we are talking about accelerating innovation at the interface between these 3 important stakeholders. I have the chance to have, and very humbled by this, to have the probably best panel to discuss these topics. We'll have Christian Ruiz who is on a speedboat, right? You're on a speedboat between Unispital Basel and his own startup, Moonlight AI. So I think it's a fantastic movement, right? You are going into that direction. Hannes from Digital Health Companion, who has a very unique model for his startups, partnerships with 3 pharma companies. We'll talk about this later. I thought it was like a lighthouse of what is possible. And then we have Therese from Novartis, who has worked a lot at the interface with startups at Novartis Switzerland and now at Novartis headquarters, and who has a fantastic role, right? You are now the patient representative or the patient centricity driver in a product launch, if I've understood it correctly, which I think is a fantastic new role evolving also in our region, I think very important. And then we have hospital with Martin from Clara Spital. In our discussions, fascinating discussions we had as we prepared, extremely fast in deploying solutions at the interface with startups. You don't need to be big to do that. So we heard, you told me you have been very efficient in doing that. And then Bram Stiltjes from Unispital Basel, I'm sure you know him all, an advocate of innovative models of collaboration and an advocate of leveraging health data also to make these models happen. So thank you very much to all, and I will move here a little in the middle, not to be on the side of the panel. We were joking as we were starting the panel, is it on purpose that we have the startups on one side and the real world? They kind of describe themselves as the real world. I'm not sure, maybe we have to see about that. But that's kind of the setup we have today. I would like to, we will do 5 rounds, kind of. I want to talk about value, where we see value in this collaboration. I would like that we talk a little bit about what the hurdles, but not too much. I know too many of these panels talk about hurdles. We'll talk about enablers. How do we want to make this happen? And then importantly, because we are here also as part of a region, as a community, what are models or frameworks that would make this happen? And then I'll ask everybody for a recommendation as we are starting. Welcome, Giancarlo. Very good. I'll start with Christian on this speedboat out of the hospital towards a pharma, and we discussed the value you see in this relationship with pharma. Maybe you can elaborate on that as we talk about value.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for this invitation. But first of all, just a quick explanation what we are doing. We are Moonlight AI, and we are using artificial intelligence in order to predict some biomarkers in diagnostics. And so for this, in order to develop these algorithms, we depend actually on data. And these are so-called image data. And as a startup, we don't have yet this data, so we have to collect this data. And there are different ways on how we can collect this data. First of all, we can go to public repositories, for example, or we just can try to buy this data. And the other possibility is to go into collaborations. Collaboration with, for example, not at this moment with pharma, but for example with healthcare providers, with hospitals. And this is what we have been setting up in the past, and it provides us a tremendous value, because we are realizing that our clinical partners are becoming some kind of our advisors. And this also gives the value to us that we are pretty sure that we will not develop something that doesn't have an impact on the patient. Okay, this is for the hospital part. Collaboration with pharma is a little bit more difficult for us. We are on a very early stage, but I think the connections we had so far, they provide us in very nice insights into commercialization, market access, and in particular into hurdles with regulatory. So at the end of the day, dream scenario would be to have, for each project, to have a clinical partner and to have someone from the pharmaceutical company.
Thank you very much. So this combination for you works, right? So you say clinical and pharma to develop your compound, but also to learn and then to launch. Our neighbor, Hannes, is deep with big pharma, and I think it's a very interesting model. If you can say a few words about how all of that adds value to your patients, actually. Yeah.
Sure. So thank you for having us. Really great round, and I'm actually amazed by the number of people listening. So this is really something. So I represent a small startup, Digital Health Companion. We are building care solutions for patient communities from the rare disease field. So for small patient communities with very particular needs. Classically, not a field where there is a lot of innovation or a lot of focus, because, well, small patient numbers difficult to scale, very individual care, very personalized needs of the patient communities. My background, I'm an MD, I'm a pediatrician, and I founded this company a year and a half back now, from a medical background, really. We've been working with those patient communities, we understand the patient needs a lot, and we've been seeing this lack of digital support in everyday life, which is making a tremendous difference for the patients. But again, it's not a very viable business model as such. So we have developed a care platform for patients with a very rare disease, spinal muscular atrophy, that has drawn a lot of attention recently because of novel, innovative pharmaceutical approaches. We have gene therapy, we have gene-modifying therapies out here by big pharmaceutical companies. And what we've been trying to do is to say, okay, we have a small community, we have very particular needs, and what would classically happen? We have pharmaceutical companies building care solutions, digital solutions, support solutions by themselves. And in a market where it's small, and we have 3 different treatment options, we would end up having different solutions, and that is not patient-centered, right? For a patient, it's difficult to comprehend. Why would I use 3 apps on my phone to manage a disease, to get information and all that? So what our approach has been is to actually sit down with pharmaceutical partners and say, okay, is there a common ground for collaboration? And we've been building our prototype, and we've released our care platform, so that's out. But our main focus was to actually foster collaboration between 3 big companies. So this is Roche, Novartis, and Biogen. And they actually partner on one particular platform, pool resources, which is financial resources, but also insight, personal, biomarker, ideas, concepts. And we've been really aligning this a lot. And our learning was that even though it might be difficult and it needs a lot of legal framework and a lot of talks and a very clear way of collaborating, at the end of the day, collaboration between big pharma is possible. And our role as a startup has been really to use a neutral ground and provide a neutral room where pharmaceutical companies which can cooperate but also are in strict competition, where they can actually meet and generate value for a patient community. And well, this has been our journey for the past year and a half, and we are tremendously grateful for having an amazing group of partners who are actually willing to set aside, to some degree, competition and to focus on patient needs, and to develop strategies that are beyond just the product, but maybe well, looking into the future of using data, healthcare data, of providing services that are beyond the simple treatment.
Thank you very much. I think that's a very, very nice example, showing not only that it is possible to collaborate between multiple pharma companies and a startup, but also that's probably the best outcome for the patient, right, as you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we call like our win-win-win situation. Mm-hmm. So there's no one really losing out in this scenario. And it's difficult to find this, right, because competition still exists, and we can touch on this later maybe, but still, it's has been a novel model, and for a group of big pharma to come together on such a particular small niche, it's, I think, pretty new.
Thank you very much. We will move on the other side to Therese with Novartis, right? So you have had a great experience, or a long experience working with startups, digital health startups at Novartis. Where did you see the value created?
Yeah, thank you, and welcome everyone. Yes, you're right. In the last couple of years, I have been collaborating with a lot of startups to really create some exciting novel tools for HCPs, but also for patients in particular, which is now my major focus. And what was really the value for me, and also then for Novartis in the end, was manifold. So on one hand, it was really a great way to engage with very open-minded people, with very inspiring people that had really good ideas, and that we could really work with, co-create with, and really created ideas that were true innovative and that were really bringing some value to the healthcare system and to the individual. So for us, that was really, and is still, a very important value of why we want to collaborate with startups, because you guys, you really have the very novel ideas, the cutting edge technology, and the capabilities that sometimes we might not find in our companies, or that are not as, let's say, strongly built in that way. So that is really very important for us on that sense. Another point that for us is important is also the ways of working, because most of the startups are quite small, so they can act really fast, they can really produce quite fast results, a prototype, they can test much faster than we might be able to do that, because we have some more processes in the background, I'm sure many of you are aware of that, that are necessary, that we have to also do, but that slows down. And if you think about innovation, you can't say, okay, I want to innovate, but it takes like 10 years to do that. So you need to have a partner to work with to really also be fast and deliver something when it's actually needed. I have to revise that. You need to have it ready before it's needed, right? And that's why I very much enjoy working with startups, because you can really help us a little bit overcome that hurdle internally to really provide something truly of value for the healthcare system, for patients, and for HCPs. And that for me was really one of the, or is one of the major values that I see. And I hope that I can definitely continue on those journeys working with startups together and co-create.
Fantastic. So two things, right? One, new technology is access to things that will make a difference to patients, and then the ways of working that you have assimilated. And that's the perfect segue to Martin, who talked to me as we were preparing about how much value it has brought for himself to work at the interface with startups and his hospital. Martin.
Thank you, Frank, for the introduction. I really have to reiterate what we actually talked about in the introductory session. I'm the reality checker. I'm okay. I've got a research background, but right now I'm working in a hospital, and we really have to get those things down to the basics and to make it work in clinical life. But I have to reiterate what Therese just said. Collaboration has always been a major treat. When you were able to collaborate with those startups, it was fantastic, disruptive. Okay, you had to have a team that was open for change. We've heard that this morning. You have to be open for change. But let me give you an example. We worked with a software company, and usually we do projects. So we talked about projects yesterday. And those projects are usually designed to work for a year. And the first 4 to 8 weeks are reserved for the survey of the status quo. They do agile Scrum cycles within less than 4 weeks to change their complete software. This is totally amazing. And so it's always been a treat. It's been fantastic to work with them, and I love it. But where do we create value in the clinical life, Serena? We have to match our demands with their possibilities. And that's where the problem starts. And that's actually where we are looking for value. We have found some startups that could help us, but it's really like picking in a really big haystack, because you have to find the right partner that solves your problems. And well, with that, I want to hand over to.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's very insightful to see how this interface also changes ways of working and helps you also to accelerate your own work. And I'm going to pass it to Bram, which I know has had a lot of experience on the difficult side working with startups, also on the good side, I hope. And now I would like you to focus maybe on the good side now.
Yeah, exactly. So this round is the opportunities, right? And yes. I think I don't want to repeat what good things that the other people said. I think on an abstract level, there's a very high gain for both parties. And that's like, so instead of hoping to get a solution from a startup, like something I can still install in my hospital, I get an input for an idea. And I think that's a big value. And it's also been said, it's the power of a proof of concept. Like I can, do literature research and say like this is technically possible, and then the people in the hospital will say no, we've never seen it, it cannot happen. So the way to convince people in a relatively, let's say, conservative environment for good reasons at that is really like creating proof of concept. Now, and that is really kind of a tool to create or to use for change management, because this is like the real problem, that people don't want to change, and how do you convince them that things can be done different? So this, I think, like on that level, it's always positive to work with different sized companies and especially with startups, because they bring in those new ideas. I think in in other rounds we can then say, yeah, but there are risks attached to it, and conservative organizations don't like the risk. But if you don't have the goal of like, okay, I work with this small startup that builds the software and I want to install it in a year, but it's more like, okay, we have a problem and we want to address it and have a proof of concept afterwards, I think it's really great. So that's really what I see as a strong, almost indebatable value of working with different startups. And if you go in like this, I think it's also smart in terms of expectation management. Because then, we are at the pressure of doing things better in the hospital, but that pressure often doesn't match resources. So if you go in like this and hope to get good concepts of how to move forward. And then maybe another thing I just wanted to mention is like, what is our current status in a hospital to buy software, right? We just listen to a vendor and they say, we are great, and then we buy it. Right, so I'm over it. So working with startups helps you to look behind the scenes and then ask other questions to bigger vendors that might be able to outlast the whole battle of bringing this in clinical routine. So this is also really a way to use these collaborations again to kind of sharpen your ideas.
Fantastic. So I really like I will remember the power of the proof of concept from Bram, which startups can bring to a big ship or a big boat, such as a hospital. We'll spend 5 minutes, not too much, because I'm a positive person, but we need to talk about difficulties and hurdles, right? And we have seen in the survey before, very often what we also hear in our acceleration programs from big pharma is that simply the technology is not there, so that the solutions are not mature enough. So Therese, on your Novartis seat, would you agree on that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, as Bram actually just said, our general approach is that we start small, right? We co-create something together, and then we run a small pilot, and then if that's successful, the next step is actually to scale. And for us, that is sometimes a major challenge that we are facing, because the startups are sometimes really too small to have the capabilities, either technology based or also human resources based, to really support that scalability. And obviously we as a pharma company, we can support that a little bit, but only to a certain extent, right? Because it's not our startup, but we want to see it as a different company. And that also brings another point here, which is about IP, right? So when you really talk about collaboration and really true collaboration, you also have to consider IP rights and who owns which rights, and how can those rights also maybe on a long term bring a return of investment for both, right? The startup but also the pharma company, so that there's really a business case for both worlds. How can we manage those? I'm not saying that there are no answers to those questions. I strongly believe that there are answers, but we really have to start questioning maybe the status quo sometimes a little bit, especially in bigger companies, to really maybe also change the system and the approaches that we have. But as I said, I mean, it's hurdles, and we are also here to overcome hurdles and find solutions together. And that's also I want to end with a positive note here. In my experience, we always found solution to those questions with startups. So to really create a win-win solution for both of the parties.
Thank you very much for validating this problem of scalability somehow. I will jump here. Each of you, Christian or Hannes, scalability. So how do you perceive this at the interface with a larger company, a pharma company or a hospital?
Well, we define now scalability. Again, we are at a very early time point at the moment, and scalability will be for sure when we go into the clinical trials. When we plan the so-called non-observational, observational and non-observational trials, and for this purpose you need different centers in different countries, and then so this is the way how we plan this, the road, and how we plan to scalability. But I would like, you mentioned hurdles, and I don't want to talk too much about hurdles, but I was discussing just before this meeting with Therese, and we made jokes about time, actually. Mm-hmm. And as a startup, you usually are in a so-called accelerator, which is great, mm-hmm. but it's time limited. It's 12 or 18 months, and then you have to move in the financing round, so you have clear milestones that you have to fulfill, and you don't have time to spend mm-hmm. 6 or 9 months to discuss IP mm-hmm. with the legal department of a large company. So, the same is true for some hospitals. I would like just to mention one positive example was the university hospital. We signed an agreement there within, I think, 3 weeks, because all parties were agreed from the beginning. That was one of these great examples, honestly. But time is issue, definitely.
Anything you want to add, Hannes? Or?
Yeah, just a very quick note. So. Hurdles in general, I mean, our business model, you can imagine, has tons of hurdles, right? So if you collaborate closely, competing partners, many problems. My take has been, and that has to do with expectation, that has to do with IP, just be very clear in communication at the very start, right? Because it's very easy to sugarcoat any relationship. That can be like, personal, that can be in a business setting. And there is a lot of honeymoon atmosphere if a startup comes and there's a big company and everyone profits and it's this great win-win-win situation. Then after time, you look into your contract and you're like, oh, wait, we didn't discuss this really, right? And my take has been, make it simple. So if you find a contract or some way of collaboration and you can't fit it on 2 pages, like as a sort of playbook, well, probably it's very complicated. And have you thought about it clearly, right? And the IP question is easy. It's easy. And I'm a strong advocate of just saying it out loud and clear, what is our deal? And then let's be open to not collaborate. And I think there are so many startups going into collaboration, going into financing rounds, going into VC, and not being fully aware of the implications and not being fully honest on what it actually means down the road. And if you have that sorted, I think you can overcome many hurdles.
Mm-hmm. Does that work for you, Bram? Yeah.
So it's always easy in hurdles to talk about like time and money, right? But I like the way the discussion is going, because actually it should go to really honest discussions, and the way we deal with it, that's why we make contracts quite fast, is let's say the logic that we, at least as the R&D IT team, say, okay, we are a hospital, so our business is around caring for patients, right? And a startup comes in with their business idea. They take all the risk. So the IP discussions I had so far is all the IP stays with the startup, all the IP, no discussions. Because the chance that they will survive is miserable. They know that, right? So, and we are sitting on our fat chairs getting money basically from the canton, right? And then we also want IP from companies that want to work with us just because we're sitting on our chair and we are the access point. I hate that. I think it's totally wrong. We are in such a secure position compared to the startup that we should not, as a hospital, try to rip out some money out of these collaborations. So keep the contract very simple, as you say, just say, and what I want. So let's say we are successful. So this is the playbook I go through with discussions and say, let's say your startup will be successful, highly unlikely. Then, but if it's successful, then I want, as return on my investment, I want, for instance, free use of the software for an agreed amount of time. And I think that's fair, because that, if we are successful, contributes to the quality of care in my hospital, right? So that's my business. And then you have a very simple contract, and And then I just have to convince, actually the problem is usually not the startup, because they say, oh, okay, this is great, right? It's more my own legal department that I then have to say, no, we're going to do this, right? So, but this is like, okay, now time is not an issue anymore if you do it like this. And then you can concentrate on the work.
This difference between your business model and the business model of a startup, right? You need to understand it's a different business model.
Our business is healthcare. Yeah. We have to focus on that. And the others should focus on.
Martin, you want to add from the hospital perspective?
Of course I want. I could, again, dwell on the usual stuff, HR resources in the IT department are limited, financing, we've heard that, and there's another aspect, especially if we're going to healthcare. The physicians, nurses, rat techs that are working there, they are aging, they're older generation like me. So they're not ready for a change. And that disruptive change that comes from you guys, from startups, they're not ready for that. So we have to kind of like prime them for that. And of course, the research department in the university hospital is ready to acquire new technology. But I don't want to name any department. Let's say a department X in a private hospital in the Basel region may have an aging physician population that is not willing to change so rapidly. And so for them, it's really hard, and that's a big hurdle that we have to account for. Another truly prevalent hurdle for us is longevity of that startup. So we're looking for mature startups to help us with our clinical problems. But nobody can guarantee us that this startup is looking at a longevity like we do. We're 100 years old almost. So we want really to engage with partners that are going to be there tomorrow. So that's another big hurdle that we have to account for. And of course, you're in a better position on that part because you could just simply take over the business and do it yourself. We can't because we don't have the resources for that.
Thank you very much. So these were the hurdles, and I think it was a good conversation, which was very positive, right? We talked more about expectation, clarification up front. We don't need to make all the deals all the time. We need to select the ones that work. I liked a lot this idea of, well, these are different business models between the three partners we have on the whiteboard, right? Pharma is a different business model than a startup, and that than a hospital. This needs to be understood when these discussions happened, and that there is this cultural change. Maybe that is needed also on the hospital side as things accelerate around these hospitals. I want to move now to what I like the most, and the enabling stuff. So talking about how do we enable transformation, how do we accelerate? And I'll start with Therese. As we had been discussing, it's very related to what Martin was saying about educating maybe your environment. So go ahead.
Yeah. So last year I have been very much engaged in a digital health nation, which is an accelerator from day one. I see also some startups here. And we had a lot of discussions about the right value proposition and also the right business model. And what I heard a lot was like, when we talked about financing, so yeah, big pharma, they will just invest and they will support us. And I was like, okay, we might, but it's not that easy. So what I want to tell you with that is that I feel that we need more education so that people also understand how we work as a pharma company, that startups understand that, what needs we have, what gaps we have, and where we could find a common ground to really work on a common goal together. And that sometimes also our processes and our needs are very different to what a startup needs. So that was really one thing that was kind of enlightening for me, that we need to have more exchanges to understand each other, to understand the business models, the ways of working, the expectations and the goals and so on. So I think actually you started or will be working on a similar initiative to put more education towards those topics, towards the startups, and I think that is a great idea really, to foster the exchange and to facilitate the communication and the collaboration in the end. So that was one thing that I think would be helpful to enable and accelerate the collaborations.
Thank you very much. I will bounce this now to Hannes. You are talking about educating startups, and I think Hannes spends a lot of time educating big pharma. So I would like to have your perspective. Maybe
yeah, absolutely. I love it. So actually, the level of understanding from the opposite side is crucial. Mm-hmm. This is crucial, it's paramount. There is absolutely no way a startup will understand the legal implications of a big pharma company unless they tell them what's our problem. So there are so many things I learned, and now I better understand. So if I look back at my own way of communication a year back, I get the chills, because there is so much I understand now, which is something that is not on purpose. It's the reality we live in. And on the same end, we talked to a pharmaceutical company very early on, and they said, well, okay, so can you pass on your request to your legal department and then come back with, And I said, well, we don't have a legal department, right? So in full honesty, I'm sitting at home in home office, the COVID lockdown. There is 2 more MDs which I can't meet because one of them is COVID positive, and we have 1 freelance designer working for us, and actually I have a friend who's a lawyer and actually is quite good, and he might help us out. So, and back then there was some worry to actually say, okay, am I going to be too transparent? What are they going to think about us? And at the end of the day, it's all coming back. So what do you need to accelerate? You need someone you can trust from the opposite side, who's as open and transparent and clear about expectations. And if you found that person, I think the possibility of growth are amazing. So what we found, like what our main win in the past year was actually big pharma coming to us and saying, we have a problem with our collaboration with our legal department. Please help us out. Can you write the contract? Mm-hmm. That was a very simple request, and we've been moving much faster. The moment big pharma said, it's difficult for us. It's difficult. There are so many people involved. We don't know the collaboration model. We don't know how to do this, and we have money and we have resources, but we can't fix it. Can you fix this? And it wasn't that difficult for us. To accelerate, find people who want to really collaborate and find a personal relationship that can last over some bumps along the road.
Thank you very much. You want to add something, Christian, to that?
No, I fully agree. I just want to add a comment to something Therese said. It's about, for sure, fostering a culture of exchange, but I will also say, I will add actually it's to foster a culture of risk-taking. And Bram, you mentioned it before. So from the startup side, we take a huge risk and we have fun, honestly. It's great. But it's also for our partners, actually, we also expect, we know that working together or collaborating with a startup is risk-taking and nothing else. Because most of the startups will not survive, let's be honest. Well, at least a large part of them. So it's risk-taking for the partners, for the partners, and I think this is something that we really should, first of all, should appreciate, and second, that we have to foster this culture.
It's kind of the realization of this kind of panels where we discuss about all these complicated things, and when we talk about enablers, it's all on the personal side, right? So we hear now that it's very important to understand the others, that it's very important to have a level of understanding of what each other can do. It's very important to trust the other side, or at least to find one person on the other side that can help. But I still wanted to go back to the financing and the resources, right? You were talking, Martin, for you it's extremely difficult, right, to find resources in a hospital to activate those startups. What would be your recommendations or enablers to make that happen?
There's probably 2 things. One is finding the right match. And as Christian just said, we have to be willing to take the risk, which is easy for a big research institution like a university hospital. it's not that easy anymore for a smaller institution that does clinical research, but is not really able to handle the risk of some software solution that is going to spread out over the whole hospital and is going to work only for 3 years, and then the startup is not reaching its maturity level and it's going to die. So that's a huge risk on our side that has to be backed by funding, and we could imagine to cooperate with either a startup on one side, us on the other side, and a venture capitalist who says, okay, we're kind of like taking some money in our hands and give it to you to account for the risk. That would be an ideal combination, and I come back to that in your last session on my wish list. It's really something, and sorry having to say that, but our reflex always is if we cooperate with Big Pharma, we only see compliance issues. If we cooperate with startups, hey, great, brilliant idea, let's do that. So I'm very sorry about that, but that's a reflex that has grown in physicians' back of our heads because of all those over-regulations that we've seen in the last couple of years.
That's an interesting one. In your answer, you took pharma out of the equation, right? Now you said hospital, startup, and VC. I know that Bram is pretty aggressive or pretty engaging with startups and big tech. So I know you have good models. Right?
First, I wanted to rectify the overly positive picture that Martin is picturing from a university hospital. Because we are a team of about 15 people, and 3 are funded by the hospital itself, and they are for the data warehouse building. So it's not like the hospital is very strong on this either, even though we are a bigger hospital. So just to make sure that we are not...
Who funds the other 12?
What?
Who funds the other 12?
Yeah, that's the point, right? So now we go to my favorite topic, high quality data. And that's how we monetize the data warehouse, because we use it not to do analytics only, we use it to create a virtual hospital data stream. And then we can use it without having the complications of embedding software in a whole hospital environment, to test drive software. So I'm making money with that in collaboration with companies, small and big. And with that, I finance an R&D team, not because our hospital in its greatness thinks that this is smart, right? So this is the honest situation. So I run a business inside the hospital, basically, because if more than 2/3 of my team are financed by external money, that's the fact, right? But and that's really part of the environment that I think is needed is, let's say, having this money and having, let's say, I would call it a data infrastructure that makes it easy to test development, right? And I think in point 4 I will elaborate a little bit more on how far I think we should go with that, and it should, in my opinion, not be a hospital.
Bram, you are in point 4, so now, we talk about models. So go ahead if you want to.
Yeah,
elaborate.
okay. If I can just take it over. Sorry. But if you afterwards say I have a hammer and I just everywhere see nails, you can nail me. So from this experience with the data warehouse and how powerful it is to test drive software, came 2 realizations. One, that most of the data in our hospital is still crap, because we write letters. So we can talk about that on another note. I think that's the worst thing we do in medicine, writing letters. Because software runs on data elements, not on letters. And if some NLP fanatic wants to discuss that with me, I'm happy to do that. We did a lot of work on it, and it doesn't work. Not because the technology doesn't work, because the letters are so bad. Anyhow, so the other thing is that we are a small hospital still in the grander scheme. And we are, there are a lot of other hospitals around us. And if we want to really build good software or solutions, we should share data outside of our walls. And then that's something I want to point you to, is work that we're doing with the Handelskammer by Basel. It's called Baldat. And that's about creating a high-quality healthcare data repository independent of healthcare providers. And I think that's really if we talk about an environment for acceleration of innovation, is really an important step. And there are healthcare systems, I just visited Slovenia, where they did this, start doing this 10 years ago. And like when Corona happened, it took them 2 weeks to create a certificate app. Because they have a database where all the data is in there, it's defined, the APIs are defined, and the software company only has to build the front end. They can read the specifications, right? So a real open data environment, I think, is the most important thing to drive innovation in our region. If I have to really then take that, so what does that do? And then you can talk about financing it, because if parties with money profit from it, my idea would be that they take some of that money and invest in that environment, and let smaller parties that don't have that money profit from the existence of the infrastructure. So,
thank you very much. So I think Bram is saying, I mean, if we think about a potential model, I mean, the basis, of course, would be this data warehouse, this exchange of information that creates value, that allows to innovate on top of it. Before moving to the others, Martin, what's your point on that one, right? And on this monetization of data as an enabler of an innovative model, right, to innovate?
I can only fully support what Abraham just said, and I want to reiterate one statement he did. He said, writing reports is really not getting us anywhere. But that's what we used to do in the past. And that's what we learned. That's what we learned in med school. That's what we were trained to do, regardless of whether we are a family practitioner or a highly specialist in a radiology department or whatsoever. Cardiac surgeons, they have to write an OR report. And that's why we need to structure those data. And we have to find a common ground and a common platform. And what we've started with hyperlinks. Our reports contain hyperlinks so that you can click on the hyperlink and you're going to end up in the salient finding of that tumor in the lung. That's helping a lot. That's the first step. But we have to harmonize that and we have to standardize that. And we're too slow on that part. We're way too slow. There is better examples out there. And I just have to mention Denmark on that part. They're far further down the road and far further developed than we are right now. And we really have to look at them and kind of like find some good examples and kind of like copy them at this point in time.
So harmonization of data warehouses on the pharma side, right? If you look at what would be the perfect model for you, maybe Christian,
Well, I mentioned before already that data is key to success for us. So we are very happy that we can work already with these partners. I would actually, with regard to data, with regard to the hospitals and how to accelerate everything, I'm a big fan of these accelerators. I'm very happy that we are part of the Day One Accelerator. It helps a lot also connecting us with the different partners. But I would actually love or appreciate very much if the hospital would also become some kind of partners of these accelerators. I don't know, Martin, how you want to fund this, but actually it would be great because this would allow startups to interact with the clinical partners at a very early time point and to realize also what kind of data is available and how to access it. So that would be my wish for this.
Johannes, on the model side?
Yes, so the ideal model, and we've talked this through many times with many partners, and what we call it is cautious radical collaboration. So be very cautious about the collaborations you enter. Be very selective about the collaborations you enter, because it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of resource. It takes a lot of getting to know another person, diving into the needs. So be selective, but if you've chosen your collaboration between a startup and a big pharma company or another big tech company, or like there's so many ways of collaborating, but we're talking about asymmetric collaborations. If you're entering an asymmetric collaboration, be cautious, and if you enter it, be radical, because you need to be very open. The IP issue, I don't see IP issues. IP. We write so much about IP. If a big pharma company decides to take my IP, what am I going to do, right? So there's not going to be. We don't even have the resources to fight in court, and it's not going to happen anyhow because there is so much personal knowledge involved and stuff like that. So be radical, be very open, be very transparent. So I like the models of being very cautious, and then if you enter the collaboration, just share teams, share ideas, circulate ideas, have teams meet, crossover teams, and dilute the boundaries between these collaboration partners. So that's our take, and we've taken some steps towards that cautious, radical collaboration ourselves.
Thank you very much, Therese. We talked a lot about collaboration when we prepared, so your point?
Can I just
yes,
respond?
Of course.
I will be very fast. So actually we have some startups working in our team, and they are really on the same side, and they have the same access to all the data. And that's so. I just wanted to say, like, we do it the same way. Either we can do it, and then I say, like, okay, be part of our company, like, be a little bit like the HIV virus, right?
So from my side, also, Hannes, this is exactly how I also envision the way of sort of working with a startup, because otherwise you'll get nowhere, right? So you have to share. You have to be one team, really. And titles and companies shouldn't play a role in that sense. And I would also go just one step further, really also emphasizing and creating collaboration between pharma companies. So really breaking the boundaries there a little bit, and really, because in the end, we all have the same goal, right? We want to help patients, physicians, and improve the healthcare system in an ideal world. And if we could also work together as pharma companies, together with startups, then I think we can have an even bigger impact on the whole system and on the individuals. I know that this is a very bold idea, and that also comes with some hurdles, and I know that you probably have faced some of those, but I believe that this is really the way to go, because, and you guys probably know, I mean, how many different apps does a physician want for the same disease or a patient, right? You want actually one that you can use for several different medications of the same disease in an ideal world. So I think that would be amazing if we could work on this approach and really to foster those collaborations as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We are close to the end of this panel. I would like to ask each of you your one recommendation on how to make this happen, right? And we talked a lot about things now. We talked about the models we could develop here. Just the one thing you believe we need to make happen. I will start with Martin.
I want elitepartner.ch for matching healthcare institutions with startups that can serve their needs and a venture capitalist.
So for me, I wish that we all could be more bold and could be more courageous to really create good collaborations, to take risks, and eventually also to break boundaries between different partners and challenge the status quo.
I want an open healthcare data ecosystem according to the model of Catalonia or Slovenia.
I want to have the partners, like the clinical partners as well as pharmaceutical companies, as part of the accelerators, so that we can access them at a very early time point.
So I think the main point for us has been that you need to talk and you need to exchange ideas and be open. Don't be worried about losing control over what you have thought of in your basement. And a great example of that is actually, I'm not going to talk about myself, but about Christian. We just met half an hour ago, and I just learned that a year and a half back, I sat on a day one conference with Cesar Taskin, and I just found he's your business partner. And it's a small world, so talk about ideas and be open about it.
Thank you very much to the panel. I don't think I even need to make a summary of the discussion, because these 5 points were, I think, what summarized everything. We are doing a lot of this at Day One Healthcare Innovation. Please connect with us if you are interested to join our events. As an innovator, we do many of those. We do many educational platforms. We run, just for healthcare, we run 3 accelerators at the interface with the medtech world, at the interface with the hospital world, and at the interface with big pharma. So join us. If there are startups in the room, please join us, join our acceleration programs. And if there are sponsors in the room, contact me. I will be at the booth. We always look, of course, for funding to support startups and projects. So thank you very much for this session, and we'll meet all at our booth if you want, or at the networking session later today. Thank you very much.